Chapter 13. "Wake up," said a voice. I opened my eyes to Bertrand. He was standing in my hollow, which he rarely did. He had said something once about the smell. This comment about the smell had been hurtful to me at the time, and he got upset with himself about saying something so callous, so we never talked about the smell of my lair again, but he never visited again either. But now here he was. "You have to see this," he said. "See what?" I asked. But he was already flying away. Bertrand does this thing when he wants to show me something where he flies ahead 5 or 6 feet off the ground, but just ahead of me. He talks and talks, so I have to keep up, and meanwhile he's leading me where he wants me to go. It's a very effective kind of moving and talking scheme that he has developed. "Okay," he said, flying above and ahead and talking down to me, not in the bad way. "I know how much you like weird pictures and rectangles, and I know you've been wondering what's going on with that building going up near the plaza." The building had been a mystery to us all, and this caused some concern with the bison. For weeks, months, I ran by every day, checking and sniffing and ascertaining, contemplating and mulling, and every evening I would go to the bison to report on what was happening, and every evening I knew nothing more. The building was going up fast, and there were hundreds of humans going in and out, clattering and sawing and knocking and yelling, and yet I couldn't get any more clarity on just what the building was for. This lack of clarity was causing the bison to lose a bit of faith in me, I worried. I also knew that since my brief captivity, they and everyone had worried about me, thinking I was traumatized or somehow affected or somehow less than I was before. None of which is true. I didn't think it was true. I worried it was true. "So," Bertrand said, still flying above, "I was at the new building just now, and listen. First of all, that thing is enormous. It's like the biggest building you or I have ever seen. Definitely the biggest thing in this park, okay?" I never knew if Bertrand needed me to say okay when he said okay. So usually I just nodded to get him to move on and keep him telling the story. "There aren't too many windows," he continued, "but there are some, and I was perched near the top where they have those little windows so the sun comes in." "Skylights," I said. Bertrand was so intelligent and so worldly and knew much more about the human world than all of us, but occasionally he did not know a word I expected him to know. I had introduced him to the word pupusa, too. "Yeah, right, those," he said. "And I was there, looking down inside, and man, there were like 1,000 pictures in there, and some of them were even stranger than the ones you told me about. I mean, it's like they were on every wall, and most of them looked like they were made by loons." Now, loons are really strange, by the way. Ducks are irresponsible and self-centered, but the loons are just plain strange. "And there are people inside?" I asked. "Just a few, and they're all wearing white uniforms. They're the picture police, like the park police, but for rectangles. They don't do the walking by slowly that you say people usually do. They're not touristing. They're working." Now, this news about the pictures didn't make me too excited, though, because immediately I knew this wasn't the kind of building where my kind would be welcome. Free dogs are not let into museums, or any buildings, really. Not that we'd want to go. Why would we? And with the picture police walking around, the likelihood of me getting inside was dim. Bertrand doesn't always show it, but he's very intuitive and empathetic, and he seemed to read my feelings at that moment. "I'm telling you all this," he said, "because I was talking with some of the other assistants, and we're going to get you into that building." "There's no way," I said. "Oh, there is a way," he said. "There will be a way. And we all know you've been feeling off lately, what with being dog-napped and all. So we're going to get you into that building no matter what. And you'll love it, and you'll feel better completely. Okay?" Now this time I figured I should say okay. So I said, "Okay." Chapter 14. Could Bertrand be right about this, that a building full of chaos rectangles soon be real? The thought of it overtook my mind. I decided he could not be correct. He must be mistaken. But I had to prove it. So that evening I went to the building. The woods hugged the back of the building, so I believed I could get close without being seen. But I will admit I was wary, so much warier than I was before. I found myself looking over my shoulder every few seconds, moving like a skink, never in a straight line, never sitting still. I had to be sure that no one could sneak up on me ever again. The thought of it, of being caught by the trouble travelers and their rope, continued to fill me with shame. My idea of myself had diminished. Until my captivity, I thought I was faster and cleverer and closer to invincible. As I approached the building, I followed Bertrand's instructions to the entryway. It was a pair of large doors, big enough to drive a car through, at the bottom of a sloping driveway. When I got close enough, though still hidden in the woods, I saw no one and nothing there. The doors were closed and there was no sign of life. But I was sure this was the place Bertrand had described, so I waited. I waited and thought of pupusas, for it had been many days since I had eaten a pupusa with fervor. Then a truck appeared. It was the size of a delivery truck, the kind that sometimes passed through the park to drop off human food at the snack bar. It stopped at the driveway, turned around, and backed down the sloping drive slowly, letting out a high-pitched sound all the way. And here I should say that of all the horrible things humans have created, the most maniacal and wrong of them all is this: the intermittent screaming sound as their vehicles go backward. All of life stops when the screaming begins. All beauty ends, all music ends, clouds cleave, hearts break, and all of the world nearby waits with breath held for that sound to end. Nothing can be done during this mechanical wailing. No thinking, no eating, no running, no living. And humans could so easily correct it, but they do nothing. Some human invented this sound, and they all know it's a terrible mistake, but they all live with it, as if it were an unchangeable part of existence, like weather or death. Finally, the truck stopped backing up, and the screaming ended too, and the world was allowed to begin again. The tension that had overtaken my body let go, and I watched as the back of the truck met one of the building's giant doors. The truck's engine was cut, and a man jumped down from the cab. He was wearing a white jumpsuit and a blue hat, looking like the ice cream man who used to drive his truck through the park, although that is no longer allowed. He walked to the back of the truck and rolled the door up. It thundered as it rose, its peak punctuated by the loudest of clacks. Another man appeared from inside the building, and the two men talked a bit and then went back into the truck. They emerged carrying a huge rectangle, almost as long as the truck itself and covered in plastic. There was some trouble getting the end of it out of the truck, though. Something got stuck and they put it down, and when they did, I got a good look at it. In the rectangle, I saw what seemed to be an impossibly large rock, and there was something like fire, and there were 1,000 enormous trees far bigger than any I'd seen, and there were many, so many tiny humans wearing crowns. Oh, it was beautiful. It was so wrong and right. But I had to look away. I knew I had to look away. I could not get hypnotized again. Could not become like the deer. Could not become again what I'd become before. Kept. So I looked away. And when I looked away, I saw something. I saw something by the pond. The pond. The new building was next to the park's peanut-shaped pond. Did I tell you that? I should have told you that. The pond was a man-made pond. It's a dirty pond. It's a smelly, peanut-shaped pond, and it is full of ducks, because if ducks love anything, it is a smelly pond. And this particular smelly pond is one the humans love, because they can sit in plastic boats and pedal their feet and go so slow it makes me cry. They like to paddle their boats under the little bridge that spans the narrow part of their peanut pond, and atop this bridge, this day, I saw something. There was a little girl there atop the arched bridge, a tiny person, just getting used to walking, and she was bobbling herself across the bridge and doing so in that clumsy way very small people do, as if her legs were two pogo sticks of mismatched lengths. Like I always do, I looked around for the parents or the siblings or the watcher of this child, but this time I saw no one. Now, the thing about this bridge is that it is not safe. The humans of this park are interesting in that they make everything very safe and tidy for other humans, especially in those places where the humans most congregate. Whenever they make a new building or bathroom or path, there are little handrails and signs to be sure that no human falls or becomes confused. But these older places are different. I figure the pond has been here for about 10,000 years, so it is not subject to these careful planners. And while I watched her, I began moving toward her in the bridge. My legs compelled me. My feet moved without my asking them to. I was moving through space slowly but steadily toward her because sometimes my legs and feet have a kind of second brain, a kind of auxiliary intelligence that gets me out of trouble, but in this case, got me into trouble. The paddleboat pond is one of the busiest places for humans, and this bridge is very popular. And it was always curious to me how they let it remain so rickety and so full of gaps. The bridge had a railing and had a line of columns that held the railing to the bridge, but these columns were weirdly spread out, leaving wide gaps between the columns, which I'd always considered odd. Anyone could so easily slip through. So my legs and feet continued to bring me closer to this girl because something was about to happen, and even before my brain or gut knew it, my legs and feet did. This little girl on the bridge was wearing a yellow dress and white socks and was carrying a plastic doll, a tiny grown woman with long brown legs. She shook it as if trying to wake it from a deep slumber. She was paying no mind to the bridge and the gaps in the columns, and I thought, there is a decent chance that this girl will slip through one of these wide gaps and will drop into the pond below, which is about 6 feet deep and not at all clean. Then again, I thought, every day I saw humans on bikes, near cars speeding by, and I always knew the possibility of collisions and calamities, but these imagined collisions and calamities had never happened in my presence. In all, I saw so many near accidents that I had begun to think that the park was somehow immune to misfortune. By this point, I'd reached the far end of the pond and was watching the girl on the bridge from a safe distance, in the high grass that surrounds the pond, when I sensed, sorry, it was the smell, the presence of turtles. First of all, I love them. Everybody knows I love turtles. They are cool. I am cool and they are cool, but they smell, and always they smell, in large part because they swim in this peanut pond, which smells. I told you about this smell. Hey, I said to the turtles, and one of the turtles, whose name is Gregory, said, hey, to me. So as I watched this toddler on the bridge, still alone and still perilously close to the edge, I knew in my heart that it was another time when I was seeing what might happen, but which would certainly not happen. And yet no adults or guardians of any kind seemed to be claiming this child or seemed concerned about her in any way. You see this? I asked the turtles. Gregory said. He turned his attention to the girl. Where are the parents? He asked. And now a few other turtles stopped to watch too, all of our heads going back and forth, looking on one side of the bridge and then the other for some sign of a human that would whisk this toddler to safety. And then she dropped into the water. There was no preamble or prelude. She was standing one moment. The next, she was falling. She fell face first, as if she were intent on finding something at the bottom of the pond, her eyes open and her expression serene and even curious as she fell waterward. And all the while she held tight onto the long-legged woman doll. When she landed on the black water, her weight made a considerable splash, the plastic doll striking the surface with a high-pitched thwack. Oh no, Gregory said. On the days when I swam in the ocean and watched the humans swim in the ocean, fighting the savage waves, I was accustomed to a certain delay between the crashing of water and the reemergence of the human face, whipping the water from their eyes and hair. So when the child hit the water, the turtles and I all gasped, but waited a split second to see if the toddler would return to the world above the water. After the splash, though, this toddler's face did not emerge in the usual time, and so the rest of the turtles also said, "Oh no." And for some reason unknown to me, I said, "Yup," and I jumped from the shore. I had never saved a child from drowning before. In the ocean, there are only those times when you heard the next day about the drowned, and thus my memory only gave me thoughts of the drowned, the news of the drowned, and nothing about the saving of the drowning. I had no idea what to do, but in seconds I was upon the child who I was grateful was now floating on the surface, but with her rear pointing upward and her head under water. "Push her head up?" I asked myself. "No," I told myself. "Drag her to the edge of the pond." So I grabbed her rear with my teeth, holding her tightly without breaking the skin, and I swam, sideways and frantic, to the farther shore where the people were. I needed them to see her. In flashes, I saw the colors of the humans standing near the snack bar, and I hoped one of them would see us, would see this dog dragging this child through the water. And finally, one of them did. "Check out the dog dragging that hairy garbage around," said a young man, and I knew we would not be so easily saved. He was a human, but could not discern what was happening, what I was doing, and that it was a child that I was saving. I kicked frantically, continuing onward. Soon I sensed the far shore coming. I struck it with my head, but knew I couldn't get out. The sides were covered with algae. Normally, with great effort, I could swim, get momentum, and leap out, but not while dragging a child. I could only hope to lift my head and bark, hoping for someone to see us as real, to see this child as a human child, to reach in and pull her out. So I let the child go and lifted my head from the water and barked as loud as I could. The child began to drift away, and now I grabbed her again and pulled her to the edge of the pond. And again I lifted my head and barked. Nothing. I tried it all again, and on the third try, I finally heard someone scream, "A baby! A baby in the pond!" And from there, it all went quickly. Human legs ran to us, and hands reached in, and the child was lifted high and carried away. I was ready to swim away and disappear, but someone lifted me, too. When they put me on the pavement, I made it clear by shaking the water from my fur and acting as hearty as I could that I was not in need of help. I stood with people all around me, some of them taking videos and pictures with their small screens, and all the while I watched as they put the child on the green park bench and tried to revive her. The crowd was 3 people deep, and I tried to weave inside to see. Someone had found a doctor, and she was doing doctory things, and it was only then, with the girl on the bench, that I saw the child's face up close. She was bluish now, and her eyes were closed, but I saw her beautiful heart-shaped face, the softness of her. And while I was taking her in and worried for her, desperate for this to be over and her breathing to begin again, I had the feeling that I might lose my sense of my surroundings, that I might be hypnotized again as I had been by the picture. So I backed away. And when I backed away, I heard someone say, "Hold that dog!" And the voice that said those words did not seem congratulatory toward me, or grateful, or anything good. There was a disciplinary sort of voice there, and so I ran. At the speed of sound, I was in the woods and over the main road and into the next forest, and from there I cut west toward the ocean and took the trails as far as the windmill, and then went to my hollow and hunkered down there to wait out the storm, thinking my thoughts. God is the sun, clouds are her messengers, rain is only rain.